Next amendment is number 88. It's by Senator Bright. Amendment number 88 is on page 398 of the bill. It's in section 22, Department of Health and Environmental Control. It asserts a new proviso. The department must utilize at least $100 to prepare printed materials concerning the right to life for each born and preborn human.
Senator Orangeburg, what purpose do you rise?
Fertilization.
To make a Rule 24 challenge to this amendment in that it violates provisions already contained in Section 44, 41, 330, and 44, 41, 340.
Anyone else wish to speak on the point of order? Senator Spartanburg, what purpose do you rise? It's a point of order taken under advisement.
Not at the chamber. I was just going to ask to carry it over till he could explain his bill or his amendment.
And I don't have a problem withdrawing the point of order until he's in the chamber if we need to do that.
Point of order has been withdrawn. Any objection to carry the unanimous consent of Senator Spartanburg to carry the bill over? Senator from Greenville?
Name is a co-sponsor.
Without objection. Senator Florence, what purpose do you rise?
Is that a temporary carryover until we get all the way to the end of the section? What? Yeah, he's back in.
Without objection, we're back on amendment number 88, the previous. Senator from Orangeburg, what purpose do you rise?
And I would raise the Rule 24 violation I just spoke to.
Anyone wish to speak on the point of order? Point of order taken under advisement. Senator Spartanburg is recognized to speak on the amendment.
This amendment gives us the opportunity to put in words what we know the Constitution says. I know a point of order has been raised, but you know, we do things in this body. We are the legislature. We make the laws. We direct agencies. And this just gives us an opportunity to let folks know exactly what's going on when a life is being ended through abortion. And I don't think folks at large in this state would have a problem with that. It's something that I support, many members of this body support, and I think we ought to be allowed to vote on it at the very least. This is, I don't know if it's been read in its entirety, but, you know, the right to life guaranteed by Article 1, Section 3 of the South Carolina Constitution, specifically that no person shall be deprived of life without due process, which we have the same right under the U.S. Constitution. We're sworn to uphold the Constitution of this state and the U.S. Constitution. So it's my belief that we should have an agency put that in writing so folks will be able to see it. And I don't think there should be a whole lot of animosity against proclaiming what the Constitution plainly says. So I move for adoption.
We're prepared to rule on the point of order. Point of order sustained. The clerk will read the next amendment.
Next amendment is number 59. It's on page 402. Amendment number 59 is by Senator Bright. Amends the bill in Part 1B, Section 24, Department of Disabilities and Special Needs, adds appropriate numbered proviso. The funds appropriated to the Office of First Steps to School Readiness must be transferred to the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs to be used for general operating expenses of the department or for programs administered by the department.
Senator Spartanburg is recognized to speak on the amendment.
Members of the Senate, we talked the other day briefly then about First Steps, and we talked about the arts Commission, and I had folks come up to me and say, well, Senator, you know, if you drafted this to just remove money from the Arts Commission and send it to the Department of Special Needs, we could support that. Then I had other members come up to me and say, well, you know, if we could take it from First Steps, I'd support you on the First Steps, but not on the arts. So being accommodating, as I am, and always looking to bring people together and trying to compromise, I want to give you an opportunity on a roll call vote on both. Because, you know, the special needs, it's difficult when you're have a libertarian bent like I do and try to determine what the government is really responsible for. But these folks, these special needs children, are dependent on the government. We got a lot of folks dependent on the government that obviously shouldn't be, but these kids are dependent on the government. So when you look at the bloated salaries in the Art Commission, you look at the bloated salaries we have in First Steps, that money's going to salaries. Let's send that to the kids. I mean, I hear it's for the children. I hear that that's the mantra. It's for the children. Well, here's something for disabled children. So I move for adoption.
Senator Florence, for purpose you rise.
Mr. President, Senator Yield for a question.
Yes, Senator.
Senator, of course, I've been supportive of DDSN ever since I've been in the Senate. Great group of people out there, so many needs out there that we some years have not been able to meet. But are you aware that this year the Senate Finance Committee version of the budget, the best I can determine, gave them what they asked for? There's no cut. Now, many other agencies took drastic reductions in their budget, but the Finance Committee saw what you're saying. We need to help those special need kids out there. And they came before the subcommittee, and I think you'll hear about that a little later, and asked, and subcommittee gave. So, Senator, I'm not sure, are you proposing that we give agencies more than they say they need? Is that what you're proposing?
Well, Senator, I guess by your comment, I'm trying to keep track. People in South Carolina are not overtaxed, and the special needs people are fully taken care of in South Carolina. Are those two things I can take from the budget debate?
I don't know about your first comments. What are you talking about, not overtaxed?
Well, you made the assertion earlier about the fact that we're not taxed and we're 49th. I'm just trying to summarize. I know I can't ask you a question. I'm just summarizing what I heard.
Answer this for me. How did the word tax get in our exchange here? I didn't know there was anything in this about taxes. I thought we were talking about, you were talking about taking care of the special needs kids. Is that what you were doing?
Yeah, we were talking about taking care of the special needs kids. I was just summarizing the budget debate
I'll
at this
ask
point.
you again. Are you advocating giving agencies more than they say they need when we got other agencies that have been cut drastically? Is that what you're proposing?
Well, I know you I can't ask you a question, but our budget has grown by $700 million. Why did we have to cut agencies drastically?
Senator, did you understand, or do you understand, $495 million of that so-called $700 million is federal food stamps that runs through our budget? Are you aware of that, or did you even know that?
Well, that may be something, you know, many of us in this chamber didn't vote for the stimulus. Many of us didn't want more government control, and some of us did, so maybe we disagree on that.
So when you talk about budget growing $700 million, $495 million is food stamps, are you aware of that?
I heard that from the debate the other day. So I guess my question is, I know we're going to have an issue when we talk about the unemployment insurance and about the fact that I believe Senator Bryant has an amendment to that bill that's going to reduce some of the unemployment benefits. But obviously, if the food stamps have gone up, maybe people don't need as much unemployment benefits, so that kind of helps Senator Bryant's bill, but our amendment to the unemployment bill.
Senator Sumter, what purpose do you rise?
For a question?
Yes, sir.
Senator, I heard you say that there are some people who depend on the government that shouldn't. You did not say definitively how you felt about these special needs children. They depend on the government. Their families depend on the government. Is that appropriate?
Senator, and I think that's a debate all its own, because what happens is when people, I believe, you know, separation of church and state wasn't in the Constitution, but I believe that it's the role of the church to take care of the downtrodden, not the state. But now we can argue about that, and to me, you have a much better standing arguing for special needs children than you do arguing for folks that obviously we do have. I've been told by many that full employment's 5% unemployment. That's about the percentage of folks that won't work. So if you're going to make the argument, are special needs children deserving and are people that won't work deserving, I think that's an easy argument to say that special needs kids are deserving. But when people come to the state for charity, you take away the role of the church, and the state becomes God. And I think we've seen that in Eastern Bloc countries, and obviously that's been a failed business model, but for some reason we try to push it here.
Now that was a long answer to a short question. Do you think that special needs children should depend on the state and the families of special needs children should depend on the state for the assistance that they need?
I think it's just like we talked about Social Security in previous budget debates. When you grow where people will depend on the government for things, you can't just snatch it away. Do I think that nonprofits should be more involved in helping these children? I do. But do I think that the state, if we're gonna spend, we ought to prioritize. And to me, when we've got these bloated salaries in First Steps and these bloated salaries for this Arts Commission, I think that money will be better spent taking care of special needs kids. I do, because a lot of them are more productive in society because of money that's spent through special needs, because helping them be educated and helping them be productive members of society. So I think that's an argument that can be made. But to argue for First Steps and to argue for the arts, the folks on these salaries, I think is just a weak argument compared to disabled children.
I'm not asking you about arguments. I'm asking you, do you think that children with special needs and their families should look to the state for assistance, or is it appropriate? Do you think the state is appropriately trying to help children with special needs?
Well, if you want to discuss perfect world scenarios, in a perfect world, I would have no one dependent on the state. I would have folks dependent on their families. And I know in other folks' idea, a perfect world scenario, everybody depends on the government. So, I mean, somewhere in between, you've got to have governments, you've got to have public safety, you've got to have education. Do I believe we should have a safety net for individuals? I think we should, but I think it's going to be abused. Once you do, you have individuals that shouldn't obviously receive things from the taxpayer, and I have a concern for that.
This country did not have public schools when we started. You don't have to have public schools. This country did not have public schools when we started. Do you think that the state has an appropriate role spending money on special needs children? It's just that simple. It's not the real world, perfect world. Do you think that the state has an appropriate role in spending money on special needs children? Yes or no?
I think that in today's time it has a necessary role. But if you're asking me, should children with special needs be dependent on politicians and the state versus churches and families, and I'm not saying the immediate family, but families come together. I met a gentleman that was a Serbian truck driver just the other day, moved here from Serbia, got to have a conversation with him, and he was talking about how he felt like the state should have more control and more power. And I went down that road with him, and I talked to him about public assistance. I said, what do you do in Serbia? Because he seemed to have loved the old system. And I said, what do you do with folks that don't work? He said, well, you're assigned a job. And he went down that road. But he said that basically folks that don't work, they don't receive. And I said, well, who takes care of folks when they're ill, when they've got problems? He said, well, families take care of folks. But we don't do that here. We want to let me tell you what we want the government to do. Because I'm glad you asked the question, because it gets into a much bigger philosophical argument, which I think we should have in this Senate. And that's the fact, is the individual responsible or is the state responsible? Now, when you get down to children with special needs, that's where the rubber meets the road. But what we look at is we want the state to pay for our colleges. We want them to pay for kids to get college educations. We want the state to take care of health care. We want the state to pay for people really not to work. I mean, if people don't want to work, we're going to pay them. We'll find a way to pay them. And it all starts because you've got it. We want to help kids with special needs. We want to help those that are downtrodden. But do I fundamentally feel like that's the role of the state or the role of the church and the role of private organizations? I feel like that's the role of church and private organizations. But in this budget, would I prioritize special needs more than most of the stuff that we spend money on? Absolutely.
So let me see if I can get the question a little simpler to you. You are a huge advocate for the role of the state in compelling women to have children even if they don't want them. That's differently stated than you would state it, I'm sorry, but it's true, because you had the amendment earlier that would do away with the state's requirement under our health insurance to fund abortions for women who are the victims of rape and incest. Is that fair to say that you presented that amendment?
I'm for individual liberty, and I'm for the liberty of the unborn child.
And I'm not trying to trap you, but I'm trying to take you where I need to go to get the answer I want. That child now is born and has special needs. What obligation does the state have to that child?
I believe in states' rights. I think if the citizens of a state want to provide certain services for folks, and the majority of the state vote for that, and that's what they want to do, I'm good with that. Do I think that the state ought to be the charity? I don't. I think it's the role of the church and the role of families. But when you have special needs that are more burdensome beyond what an individual family can have, and you want to talk about funding things like bloated government bureaucracies versus those special needs children, I'm for funding those special needs children.
Now, in our discussion, and I appreciate your engagement, I haven't chosen to talk about whether or not your definitions of bloating are appropriate. I'm sure we might not agree. But what role does the state have? Forget all the other rhetoric. What role does the state have now in the life of the child that is born because by law we compelled a victim of rape or incest to carry this child and to give birth to this child? What role does the state have, not relative to anything else, but directly on the point of this child with special needs for their entire life? What role does the state have?
I think about the state, and I think about Katrina. And I think about how, as Americans, as South Carolinians, we do things to help the downtrodden. We do things to help the needy, not with the state compelling us through a tax code, but because it's the right thing to do. And to tell what we do is it's a slippery slope. When we start telling folks, we feel like.
Senator Pickens is recognized on a point of order.
Yes, sir. Mr. President, respectfully, I'd raise a point of order under Rule 24. That Senator Spartanburg's amendment says that the funds appropriated to the Office of First Steps to School Readiness must be transferred to the Department of Disabilities. You go to the First Steps statute, which is a permanent law, and it says in Section 59-152-20, First Steps funds must not be used to supplant or replace any other funds being spent on services, but must be used to expand, extend, improve, and increase access to services, enable the community, and et cetera. So my point of order is that by transferring the funds from the First Step to Readiness, he allows the funds to be appropriated, but then in contravention of existing law, transfers the funds to another agency for another purpose, which would contradict Section 59-152-24, and therefore would be violative of Rule 24.
Anyone else wish to speak on the point of order?
I'm just interested to see how the ruling goes, because I'm sure it'll impact some other issues we have between now and the end of the day.
Senator McLaren, to what purpose do you rise?
Yield for a question.
Yes, sir, Senator.
Senator, I've seen you over the last several years do this against First Steps several times. Are you opposed to the First Steps program in South Carolina?
I think it's duplicative. I think that we've got so many agencies that, as a matter of fact, Senator from Greenville mentioned BabyNet and some things where they were kind of heading up the efforts with DHEC and some other agencies. I think the overlapping agencies is some of the problems.
Well, the question is, are you opposed to it?
And it's First Steps as it exists, I am opposed to it, yes.
All right, well, let me ask you this, and I brought this up last year. Why don't you introduce an amendment to the budget that Spartanburg County gets no First Step funds?
Well, we did that.
The people must agree with you. Of course, I understand that you have in Spartanburg one of the finest First Step programs in the state of South Carolina, one that's held out to be recognized and emulated and followed all across this state. But apparently you want to end it. So why don't you just do it that way and let all of the other counties in the state of South Carolina enjoy the benefits of the money that y'all would have spent in Spartanburg?
Well, Senator, I am so glad you said that, because we are almost on the same page here, because what you're saying is that Spartanburg has the best. I've been up here 2 years in a row trying to eliminate it. Not one of my constituents has come forward and said, what are you doing with First Steps?
Well, that's what I...
Not a one. Not a one. But I got the best.
I agree with you.
But I got the best in the state.
Why don't you stop it up there?
But if I've got the best in the state, then why would we want it anywhere in this state if I've got the best and people aren't impressed with it? I mean, I imagine that a few folks that have been contacted maybe by some folks that work for First Steps. And obviously, you know, I'm going to tell you that whatever my job is very important and it's needed.
Right. I think the Lieutenant Governor's about ready to rule, so I just ask you one more question. Why don't you just go up there and tell the people what you think about First Steps and tell them that you are going to introduce legislation to prohibit expenditure of First Step funds in Spartanburg? Do you do that?
Well, we've got an LAC audit, and I think that this time next year there's going to be a lot more agreeing souls.
But you tell your people back home you're opposed to it completely, right?
I've yet to have the first phone call from a single constituent, and I've been on this floor twice ad nauseum.
Well,
I know y'all are tired of hearing it.
Owe them the amendment to take Spartanburg out of the First Step
I think we tried to do that and send it to our K through 12 program last time, and I'll be glad to try that again.
Well, I'll join you with it.
Senator from Greenville, Senator Farrell, what purpose do you rise?
Senator, yield for question.
Yes, I will.
Senator, it was mentioned, I think, did you know that I believe it was $65 million, is it 65? 35 new, $35 million new dollars were appropriated for DDSN through Senate Finance. You are aware of that?
I have had every year, since I've been here, and I'm a freshman, but every year, the first thing I hear when the budget debate comes around is they scare the disabled and all the cuts the disabled are going to face. Then I hear we're going to scare the teachers, and all the teachers start calling. So the disabled people, the folks that are dependent the most, are not upset this year because they're getting fully funded, and I think that's great, but I think that they are opportunities in the educational system through autism or some other issues that folks have, that maybe we can get kids readier for school through the system, but not through the First Step system, because all that money is going to administration.
Did you know that the throughout the state, First Steps utilizes county boards to make determinations about income and so forth? You know that, don't you? Or did you know that?
I do know that. As a matter of fact, I was shot the other day because I asked for a printout of all the First Step spending in the state, and I was given a printout, and then I looked at it, and then I was made aware that counties have their own First Steps agency. So it's a mountain of bureaucracy. I'm just curious to know, and I couldn't get the information quick enough to know what the whole state spent on First Steps.
Did you know, Senator from Spartanburg, that bureaucracy is called local government and local home rule?
So you're saying we should get rid of the First Steps for the state and just have the local First Steps?
I think that's where the real work is being done. But no, I didn't say that. If you're having trouble hearing, let me say it again. What you just described, did you know, is home rule.
Well, if we're going to have, but we are here debating state expenditures, and I've talked with staff about how much, and I've gotten a breakdown of how much is spent in Spartanburg and how much is spent in the state, but I don't think this body was aware that the money spent in counties in addition to the money that goes through it in the state. This is a huge program.
It is huge. It's money well spent, as everybody in here, most of everybody in here probably understands. It's interesting, did you know that you're taking money that would be spent on children in BabyNet and giving to money, this proviso then would give to other children. You're taking money from children to give to children. Y'all take it from prisoners. Why don't you take it from the prisoners?
Now, maybe I didn't hear that. I heard, I just didn't understand it. You're saying take from the prisoners and give to the children?
Well, you're taking from children to give to children, I just suggest if you're bound and determined to to fund DDSN at a higher level than Senate Finance, take it from somewhere else.
Well, but the DDSN, I have so many constituents that have talked about the work that they do at the Department of Special Needs. And I have individual folks telling me about their kids and how much the Department of Special Needs has helped their kids, but not once. I represent 90,000 constituents, well, now about 107 with the census numbers. Out of 107,000 people at this time live in my district, not one person has come to me and told me how important First Steps. Now, I've had, and this is what blows my mind, because our friends, you know, across the aisle are big proponents of public education, and many of us on this side are big proponents of public education. And I talk to my superintendents, and the first thing they give on the list is get rid of First Steps. I mean, I've talked to them, and they've given me a list of things where they feel like money's been spent ineffectively, but we never touch it.
Point of order is overruled. Previous point of order is overruled. Senator from Greenwood, what purpose do you rise?
Senator, do you know how important First Steps is?
I know that in Spartanburg County, and you know, Senator, another thing, we got folks that have, and I'm sure I'll get some now, because, you know, I'm saying this, but I don't get emails from around the state about Save First Steps. I mean, I'm getting tons about the arts, but First Steps, I'm just not getting it from around the state. So, and maybe they're going to call now, but I'm not getting emails.
Do you ever go visit any of the First Step facilities? Have you ever visited any of the First Steps? And what is the purpose of First Steps? Do you know?
Well, I guess it's early. I mean, my understanding is it's early childhood education, but now I understand we're going to start helping babies too with it. So maybe you can enlighten me a little more about what they do, because I haven't heard a lot from their director and their folks telling me after 2 years of budget votes what they do.
The main thing with First Steps is to have kids in the first grade on level. You know, we talk about educating our young people, and one of the most important aspects is kids to enter school on level. And that's one of the biggest steps of First Steps. You know, it's not just the money, it's about having kids to enter school on level. And that's one of the biggest problems, because if kids enter school behind, they'll stay behind. And the main thing with First Step is to have kids to enter school on level. Did you know that?
But now, Senator, and I know I'm supposed to ask you a question, but you're a former school superintendent.
No.
I thought you were.
Administrator, middle school.
Former administrator. I'm just curious if, you know, the administrators I talk to feel like the public schools are more equipped to that than the First Steps are equipped.
How the public schools are more equipped to do that when they don't have, you know, they start with K4.
Well, you know, if you start at K4 and they've got them from K4 till the 12th grade, with half our budget spent on public education, you would hope that they could get them called up.
Did you know most of the brain development takes place the first 3 years of a child's birth? That's when the brain is developing, that's when a lot of learning is taking place, and that's why we need to be educating our young people at that age?
Well, I know that in the past, folks have wanted to take children at birth and educate them from that point on, but I think that their families should have a tremendous amount of involvement, and not the state at that age.
All right, the families then, I know you're a firm supporter, you know, of every child being born. Is the state going to take care of them once they're born? Are they going to help? It's just the family's responsibility to do everything right.
Is the state going to raise the children?
No, assist.
Assist. How? I'm sorry. I'm not supposed to ask a question, but I'm trying to follow on the discussion here. We have a constitutional charge to provide a minimally adequate education. We have a constitutional charge for that.
That's what one of my key points. Minimum adequate. Is that enough for everybody? Minimum adequate.
Well, if you look at the money we spend on higher ed, apparently we want to pay for every child to get a college education. I mean, it could be 16 years, could be 20 years. I've had people call me on unemployment saying they've been offered a job, but they don't want to go back to work because they like school better. So I think that what we want to accomplish, and you and I have had this discussion before, we both have well intentions. We just have different ways of getting there. And to me, the more power the state has, the less the individual has. So what I try to do is I try to take away the power from the state and give it to the individual. And by giving our children from birth to 5 years old to the state, I think it's a problem.
Do you think it's better to have a better educated society than less educated, and funding education will cut the cost in some other areas?
I think capitalism and free market, I think that's where the answer is, not government.
Okay.
Move for adoption.
Have a motion to adopt the amendments. Have a tabling motion. Question is tabling of the amendment. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The amendment is tabled. Clerk will publish the next amendment.
Amendment number 60, it's by Senator Bright. Amendment number 60 is on page 402 of the bill. It's in Section 24, Department of Disabilities and Special Needs. Adds a new proviso. The funds appropriated to the Arts Commission must be transferred to the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs to be used for general operating expenses of the department or for programs administered by the department.
Senator Spartanburg is recognized to speak on the amendment.
I wish we'd had a roll call on the last vote. That's my fault. I want a roll call on this vote. I want to know where people stand. I think the folks out have a right to know where people stand out there that are watching. I mean, this transparency thing, I actually agreed with the senator from Darlington when he said we needed to vote amendments. I mean, I think that people have a right to know in all these agencies. You know, it's when we look at the unemployment situation and the fact that we let things drag on and on and on, and then all of a sudden we decided we're going to fix it after the LAC audit. I'd rather go ahead and have the vote and then have the audit and then see if we did our due diligence up to that point. So I want to move for adoption and ask for a roll call.
Senator Spartanburg, what purpose do you rise?
See if the senator from Spartanburg would yield for a question.
Yes, sir, Senator.
Senator, did you know that I'm very much aware of the high salaries at the Arts Commission?
Yes, sir.
And you may not know this, but did you know that I've got an amendment that forces the money to go to the educational opportunities for the children, 70%. I've got that coming up. I would just ask to see if you would be amenable to carry your amendment over, and if my amendment passes, it could fix some of those problems with that agency.
I'd be glad to do that.
Thank you.
Move to carry over.
We have a motion to carry over the amendment. All in favor, aye. All opposed? Amendment is carried over. Clerk will publish the next amendment.